Welcome back to Empowerment Radio. We just got out of bed. We realized everything is typical in its chaos state, and we already have sweaty hands, breathing a little bit faster, and pretty much have the weight of the world on our shoulders. It's a normal day of stress. So we talked about, let's take some breaths, let's slow down, let's get these sensations first out of your system. Then shift your emotions into something positive, gratitude. Maybe you want to find a little sense of humor in all of it. And now comes the more cognitive place. So that's what I wanted to ask Arch. So where do we go from here? What are our choices to think beyond that, what we think we experience?
Yeah, absolutely. We can look at it in terms of the experience of stress is showing up when there's a gap between all of the demands we have on us in our capacity or perceived capacity to handle those demands. And we know that when we take demands away, we remove some threat. Oftentimes we can't take demands away, especially like at work, is more responsibilities piled on us. So the only thing we can do is raise our capacity to handle that. And maybe that's learning a new skill or something along those lines. But I think most important is how the story we are telling ourselves and the narrative of our perception towards those demands. And listen, when we experience stress and it's against our will and it's out of our control and it's meaningless, that's where we can really run into trouble and where it can become chronic. So knowing that and knowing that we have a lot of control over how we perceive things and just recognize our thinking, recognize when there's opportunity to shift that thinking, to raise our capacity. Now, what this doesn't mean is we stay in a situation when that situation just isn't going to get any better. We can raise our capacity all we want, but fundamentally things outside of our control need to change, or it's just not the right place for us. And that's a decision that we all have to make. But before we resort to that, because we could be giving up on a really wonderful learning opportunity, but really check your mindset and your perceptions and your beliefs on what's driving you to perceive your abilities in a certain way.
Now, one of the things that I find always interesting about anxiety, but also stress, is how a lot of the stress that we are feeling is self-created.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily created by just reality. Yes, there are challenges and they can be very stressful, but it's also what I said at the beginning, these expectations we have that create a lot of stress. The expectation of, we have a class reunion, I need to have 20 pounds less in 2 weeks. The expectation of, well, my colleague got a promotion, I should have one too. The expectation of, my kids are only average in school, but they should be valedictorians. What's the matter? So isn't that the gap between what is and what we are expecting one of the major sources of stress? And what we try to do is to get the capacity up, work harder, do more, push further, and we don't really change then this other side, the demands, because how many of those demands are real and how many are just self-imposed?
Yeah, for sure. And comparison is the thief of joy. So that's where we can really get into trouble with that. I think one of the most profound mindset shifts when it comes to this demand capacity is looking at the situation in terms of performance versus purpose. And performance puts us on, and that doesn't mean high performance. We want to do innately, we want to do really well, but performance versus purpose looks at, am I doing things from the stage? Am I doing it for acceptance and for approval and for show? And when we do that, when that's our motivation, that extrinsic, probably even extrinsic motivation, that's really that adds to the demand and decreases the capacity. Now, when we engage in these challenges from a place of, when we can find purpose in it and meaning in it, it takes away that moves us off the stage and into a place where we are sharing and doing and contributing because we want to. It's the right thing, and it's not for anything other than just our own personal well-being. And I know that I think my experience with public speaking, I used to be terrified of it. But when I made that shift from purpose to from performance to purpose, that changed everything. It not only changed everything in that aspect, but the way I showed up to the work that I was doing on a daily basis. Because before it was all, like you said, it was all shooting on yourself and comparing yourself to others and holding yourself to a society standard versus one that's really innate to your own value system. And when we give up on that, of course, you can understand how the body and the mind would put itself in a place of constant threat, because we're not showing up as ourselves. We're showing up at some kind of expectation. And that's not fair to anybody.
But that's where the fun starts, I find, with stress, anxiety, that it is really going to the root. What actually creates those emotions? I mean, are they really necessary to be there, or are they created from a place where we can take responsibility and say, hey, wait a second, maybe it's how I relate to the world, to myself. Maybe it's what drives them deep inside on the subconscious level, and then going a little bit in the unearthing of that. Now, what you talked about with purpose versus performance, I think it's really, really, really important, because we do have, most of us, this tendency to take everything personally. So whatever we do is seen as a reflection on us, whether it's how the kids perform, whether it's how the spouse looks, whether it's what the boss is saying about our work. It's all very personal, and we go to that level of feeling diminished and basically disrespected and unworthy. And a lot, I find, starts with the belief that we are not enough, and that we have to do more, that we have to perform better, that we have to somehow prove ourselves. Now, in your experience, this shifting, and I think it sounds familiar on a personal level for you, what needed for you to happen to have a relationship with you that allowed you to not take things personally as you were, for example, presenting in public, but really focus only on that, what you shared as your purpose or your gift to the audience? What needed to shift inside of you?
Oh, you're exposing me, Dr. Friedman. Yeah, this is what I called archaeology. Is like that digging and that unearthing of those self-limiting beliefs, and those things are ancient. They come from way, way, way back in the day, and just anchor themselves within your little psyche and so I had, without going into too much detail, I had some absolute self-limiting beliefs around intelligence and worthiness, based on some real factors, at a very, very, very young age. And, as we age and we get new experiences and we continue to have store those in our subconscious mind that direct us and guide us and guide decision-making, they just act as somewhat of a joystick or a lack of joystick on our lives. And when we get to the root of those and take the time to, I call it me search, dig into it and unearth those beliefs and begin to challenge them, oh man, that's where freedom lies. And so much of this has to do with just being curious. just being curious about yourself and the way you're interpreting the world, and challenging it and viewing it as an adventure versus something really spooky and scary. And, you know, I think, yeah.
I think that's beautiful. And I love that you said it's an adventure. And it's really, I believe, the purpose of our existence, to really do this kind of archaeology, and me searching. And I also feel like the problem that we have is that we think we should be already perfect. You know, we shouldn't have the anxiety or the stress or the limiting beliefs. And that's not how life works. I mean, all of our parents screwed up in some ways or another. And that is something that they didn't intend to, but that's what they're supposed to do, because there is supposed to be something that we get programmed with, or by our coaches or teachers, that eventually we have to discern between what's our truth and what is what we were told. What are the impressions, the imprints, the programmings that are really not us, and they don't work for us. And so that is where stress comes in, because there is a discrepancy between that what we are, a resistance to that what we are supposed to be. And that is where anxiety comes in. That's where insecurity comes in. And so rather than saying, oh, there's something wrong with me, why have I these emotions? I shouldn't have these emotions. I should be perfect. Rather than seeing this as a problem, see it as the invitation to do that kind of archaeology and go inside and look for what is really true and what is the lie that you have believed in. And we're going to talk more about this after the break. Stay tuned.